Oh! Oh, hello.
The reaction to the trailer for Deadpool and Wolverine during Super Bowl Sunday was tremendous. However, reality has got to set in for folks out there, and that is this. This movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, will not, repeat, not save the MCU. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern right here for the live show. Back in 2016, Deadpool was a tremendous surprise. Not the least of which was to fans, but also, frankly, to Fox Studios as well. They had no idea the kind of box office they were about to unleash, with the first movie pulling in nearly $800 million globally for an R-rated superhero, scratch that, anti-hero film that centered more around the comedy aspects, or at least just as much as the action. But that was due in overwhelming part to the complete talent that is Ryan Reynolds and his passion for this project. And it really came through in this picture. This is a guy who is relatively unique in Hollywood in his stylings, and being able to take the raunchy, raucous comedy, mix it with superhero action, and come up with a solid win. Remember, that movie came in with a reported $58 million final production tally, which is unheard of, especially compared to movies today. But even back in 2016, look at the superhero films and what places like Disney and Marvel were spending on comparable films. 3 to 4 times that much. Deadpool did it for a fraction of the cost and was a big success. Deadpool 2, 2 years later, not as well received in terms of story as the first, and I would tend to agree, but still thoroughly enjoyable nonetheless. A production budget of $110 million. Still way under the bar for a lot of things coming out at that point from Disney Marvel. And that movie, yep, once again, clocked in at close to $800 million globally. Both the first and second films were tremendous financial successes for Fox Studios. And of course, that was before a single copy sold on DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, digital download, or yes, even the pay one and pay two windows when it came to broadcast television and streaming. These things were unmitigated, successful return on investments. So the question becomes, can the third film actually meet the same level of box office and financial success as the first two? Well, that depends on the answers to a few questions. The most recent entry in the Disney Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the Disney MCU, of course, was The Marvels. We all know how that turned out. $199 million in global grosses. Now, it may be a little bit higher, but the Walt Disney Company, to remind folks out there, was so humiliated by the performance of this terrible film that fans, frankly, did not care about. And folks like us warned Disney for years leading into it that this movie was a terrible investment. Well, Disney stopped reporting box office figures internationally because it just wasn't worth it anymore. And not to beat a dead horse, but let's remind folks that this catastrophe from the Walt Disney Company that was easily avoidable by simply not making it wound up losing around $200 million of Walt Disney Company stockholder capital. Oops. But The Marvels has become a cliche for Marvel Phases 4 and 5 in the MCU, handing people characters they don't know, don't care about, or maybe had to have watched a series of different shows on Disney Plus just to keep up with who these people are. See, Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel never were popular. As we've said to folks many times before here on Valiant Renegade, the only reason why the first movie, Captain Marvel, made over $1 billion was because it was given the gift of being slotted directly ahead of Endgame. 3 months before the release of Endgame, as a matter of fact. Anything in that position in the theatrical release probably would have done $1 billion. and is evidenced by the complete lack of interest in merchandise and toy sales for this character, Disney should have known better than to proceed with a sequel. And if we look at the recent history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe box office performance, Disney, as we've been saying, can ill afford to have yet another disaster in front of them. It wasn't just the Marvels coming in at $199 million. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 turned in a admirable $845 million performance, but again, when you compare that to the cost of production and marketing of this film, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 even really didn't turn much of a profit, if any at all. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was a decided bomb. It cost Disney probably $150 million in lost capital for that, given all the reshoots. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, kind of the same thing. If we go by what the stated budget was, and assuming they stuck to that and a modest marketing budget, that movie really didn't make a whole lot of money, if any. But if we believe some of the things that we heard, that the marketing spend for Black Panther was nearly double what we've seen from other Marvel films, then the movie may have actually lost a significant chunk of money. Then you've got Thor: Love and Thunder. Again, might have broken even, but probably didn't. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness at $952 million theoretically should have made some money for the Walt Disney Company, but again, reshoots and piss-poor production management, which constantly plagues a lot of big Disney films, including those from Lucasfilm, might have taken hold, and believe it or not, that movie may not have made much of any money either. Spider-Man: No Way Home, that's a Sony-distributed picture. The only unmitigated success of the MCU since Phases 4 and 5 began, and of course the movies that started Phases 4 and 5, Eternals, Shang-Chi, and Black Widow, well, no, there's no profits there either. So can Deadpool 3, or Deadpool and Wolverine, really reverse this trend? It's very possible. The big question is, how much did Disney wind up ultimately spending to complete production of this? Now, the first two Deadpool movies, like we told you earlier, came in rather cheap. $58 million for the first Deadpool movie, now right at 8 years ago. And Deadpool 2, $110 million. So even if the Walt Disney Company just produced the same thing as they did for Deadpool 2 in terms of management and budget, and then we adjust it for inflation moving up to 2024, where we have had some significant inflation in the past 6 years, let's say the production budget on this comes in around $150 million. That's going to give it a pretty good shot at turning a profit, of course, if the box office can turn in another $800 million. Now, if you adjust the box office with ticket prices from those years, 2016 and 2018, and bring them up to a 2024 ticket price situation where we've seen radical ticket price inflation since then, probably an average of somewhere around 40%, both Deadpool and Deadpool 2 in 2024's ticket prices probably would have done over $1 billion. So that is one measure of success. But of course, the budget for this film, once it finally comes in, is what we really want to look at, or whatever the final cost, the final spend by Disney really is. I would expect with a $150 million production budget, Disney might even go all in on the marketing side with a 1-to-1 ratio, maybe $150 million in marketing. They know this is about the only shot they still have left with the MCU, and I don't think they're going to pull any punches on it. So let's say the all-in cost for Deadpool 3 or Deadpool and Wolverine is $300 million between production and marketing. That means this movie is going to have to turn at least $600 million at the box office just to hit a break-even point. And for Deadpool and Wolverine, that shouldn't be a problem. Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman together on the screen, playing the characters that they are most beloved for embodying, should be a massive hit, provided that Disney didn't, well, Disney this movie. The fear with everyone is that once Disney got a hold of the assets like the X-Men from Fox in the 2019 acquisition, where Disney stockholders forked over $72 billion to acquire Fox Studios, would Disney start nerfing some of these things? Time will tell, but we're going to keep our fingers crossed that people like Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds are just frankly too damn big for Disney to screw with. Now, the good news is for Deadpool is that it's basically a blank slate, and this is where the will it save the MCU question comes into play. No, it won't. The reason that Deadpool was so popular to begin with is because it was a movie that stood on its own 2 feet. It had no connection, not in real terms, to anything else in the Marvel universe. Not just Disney or even Sony's, but even Fox's own Marvel universe. Apart from a few jokes about how Fox couldn't even afford to send more X-Men to the mansion for Ryan Reynolds' film, well, that was about all we got. You see, Deadpool, the character itself, doesn't need to exist inside of a larger universe. People want to go see this because of Ryan Reynolds, and hopefully, what Disney is counting on is they're going to want to go see it even more now that Hugh Jackman is involved as Wolverine. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Deadpool 3 comes in with a $1 billion box office haul. But then the other side of the coin could suggest that maybe it's going to be a depressed turnout because the recent entries from the Marvel Cinematic Universe have been so poor that it's going to have a lagging, damaging effect on this film. I'm less convinced about that than I am that this film will stand on its own 2 feet. But moving forward, what is this movie going to do for future Marvel Cinematic Universe entries, at least insofar as theatrical releases? Does anybody expect to see a completely undeserved spillover effect like we saw from Spider-Man No Way Home to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? I'm not sure, but that was something even before Doctor Strange came out that I predicted would happen, and it did. And now I'm going to give you another prediction, going the other way. Here's the next two. Deadpool and Wolverine coming out in the summer of 2024, and then nothing until February of 2025, Captain America: Brave New World. I seriously doubt that movie is going to be a terribly big draw. Unless you watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you're probably going to be a little lost as to why Sam Wilson is now donning some new Captain America outfit. Well, that's because, once again, the writers made a mistake and changed Falcon into Captain America, who has no superpowers whatsoever. Probably should have been Bucky, who drank the same special sauce that Chris Evans did, Steve Rogers did, to become the first Captain America. Well, no, we didn't get that because reasons. But anybody thinking this movie is going to be a big draw for moviegoers is probably going to be wrong. But obviously, there are folks out there that just don't get this. And the number of Marvel's stands, the Brie Larson stands out there on the Twitterverse, or the Xverse as it is now, this past weekend have been astonishing. This whole superhero fatigue thing never made sense to me. It's clear that people are still invested in the MCU, even if the quality hasn't been the same. That's why I don't get why people will say Deadpool will, quote, save the MCU. Save it from what? It's not failing? Never mind all of the box office receipts that we just showed you and the fact that the Walt Disney Company has lost north of $1 billion in Marvel Phases 4 and 5, and that number is mounting. That doesn't even include all the fact that the merchandise sales have completely tanked, which was evidenced once again by Disney's most recent earnings report, where they stated that not only has Star Wars fallen off the map for merchandise sales, but now Marvel has as well, citing specifically Spider-Man as being an overperformer. Spider-Man is held separate and apart from the rest of the Marvel merchandise in the Disney realm, thanks to co-licensing agreements with partners like Sony. So yeah, the MCU does need to be saved, but Deadpool isn't going to do it. The MCU is failing, but Deadpool and Wolverine is not going to fix it. And bringing in things like the TVA from the Loki television show into Deadpool might be one of the big mistakes that Disney makes. I realize they're trying to ingrain it into the rest of the new Marvel timeline, but frankly, that's a Marvel timeline that almost nobody is paying attention to. The number of people that watched the Loki series on Disney Plus, even though it was one of the biggest things that Disney Plus ever had, is still but a mere fraction of the people that went to go watch Marvel Cinematic Universe titles in the theaters in phases 1 through 3. This is a collapsing, disappearing audience. And based on ticket sales between phases 1 through 3 and what we've seen on average in phases 4 and 5, with the exception of Sony's Spider-Man No Way Home, well, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has lost roughly half, if not over half, of its entire audience. And Deadpool may be the one shining star that saves this phase of Marvel from a financial standpoint, but it's probably not going to save it from an ongoing audience standpoint. Yes, the merchandise partners will probably be very happy with what they see with Deadpool and Wolverine toy sales, at least insofar as compared to what they've gotten from the rest of phases 4 and 5 of Marvel, but that's probably not going to continue on to Captain Falcon next year, or anything else coming from the MCU that, frankly, nobody, at least compared to the first 3 phases of Marvel, well, there's just nobody left to give a damn about it. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.